What do you think about all of the like tradcon arguments about just finding a good woman?
Well,
Like a religious.
yeah, I mean, they'll say stuff like, well, just find somebody that shares your values. And to some extent, it's like, okay, I can kind of see what argument they're trying to make. But then at the same time, it's like, you'll see people even that, there's a lot of what I call cosplayers, maybe other people do too, or undercover feminists, I've heard that term. And there's a lot of people who can portray that well enough, but I think even of the people who are quote unquote that thing can still have a likelihood of ending up getting divorced. And I've spoken to people as much who've done that. I don't think it's some surefire way of anything. I think you're really gambling it, especially with them too. I think the Tradcon proposal is particularly dangerous because they have this heavy emphasis on, mom staying home, mom not working, mom not bringing any kind of financial contribution to this, and she submits and does all
Sourdough.
that. Yeah, mom makes sourdough and, does all this, has the wooden spoon and all that. They're all about the cosplaying, but my personal opinion is I think we're just kind of in a new era beyond that, and anything you see is people trying to portray that, but they're not actually that thing. We're not organically creating these kind of traditional humans.
Right, because you can't even be in a traditional... I was actually on a show the other day explaining that you can't be in a traditional relationship because women always have the leverage.
Yeah, I mean,
always.
You can be someone who makes a lot of money. Like you can be a guy with a lot of money, and you can ostensibly find some woman who wants to stay at home that's younger, but it can still blow up in the era of no-fault divorce. You don't even have to be divorced. You can just walk into the child support agency and say, hey, we're not living in the same house. I want child support, and this is what I say the custody is, and we will file against them. I mean, when it comes to the top of my head, Tyrese Gibson is someone, what I think of as someone who makes a lot of money, and he found somebody, and that didn't end up well. I know Steven Crowder is another example of a tradcon, and they all turned on that guy really fast. Yeah, I think it's largely an imbalanced proposal, and what they'll do, I just heard Matt Walsh say this, and he'll say, grandfathers, and for centuries and centuries, men provided and women did this, and this is what men biologically want to do, but they give this very reductionist view of history, and it misses a lot of important things. Like one of the rabbit holes I've been going down on my channel is the dowry and the history of the dowry. And wherever you see monogamy, you see the dowry. And the dowry is essentially a transfer of wealth that happens at marriage, but it happens from the bride's side, and it goes to that new couple. So it's pretty much an endowment on the woman, and it says, you're leaving this family, your family has this much money for you, and this is to help set up the new household. So in certain places like Greece, Cyprus, a typical dowry would be a fully furnished house, a paid-off house. That was the expectation for a middle-class family.
In Greece?
Yeah.
What time period? Like, when did the dowries start?
The dowry started around the time agriculture changed from light tools like the hoe and digging stick to heavier tools like the plow. As far as the time period of what I'm speaking of specifically, that's like right 1970s Cyprus I'm talking about right now. Now, there's a good paper. I had a discussion with Paul Elam, and we went over that paper, and they're talking about...
Really? So as recently as the 70s?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I figured it would be like 100 years ago plus.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff from around then. Different places sort of abandoned it at different times. I think England and US are probably earlier. They're one of the first places to get industrialized. You see kind of romantic love take over as, when modernization comes in, it tends to have a lot more job opportunity that's kind of different from what people were usually doing. So people can say, screw you, mom and dad, I'm going to live in an apartment with my girlfriend and we love each other. And, it just ended up that way. And then they're more interested in college and things like that. But
so in the US, was that like the 20s then? Because isn't that when it was like the 1880s to the 20s, I think? And cities started, I think in the US, I don't remember exactly, but I think that would have been sometime in the 1800s. Yeah.
The US was kind of known for abandoning these things a little bit earlier. And the reason is because, even in a lot of Europe, divorce didn't exist. It was annulments, basically, all throughout Christendom, basically. And then after you get your revolutions there, it changes. But the US was one of the first places right after the American Revolution to start saying, okay, we can do divorce now, and then they created their system of at-fault divorce. But, you know, it's in some places it was still happening, but England and there, it started to fall out of favor, especially as they got rid of, I think that's called not Coventry. Not Coventry. I can't remember the word for it, where the husband manages the finances and the woman can't take debt. So they start getting rid of that, I think late 1800s, and it falls out of favor. But the reason I think it's so important is because the dowry is the missing piece in how monogamy actually works, and it's what I call the check against hypergamy, basically. So they get rid of the dowry system and they essentially instill what is the love match. So it's we love each other, it doesn't matter what class you come from. There's all these rags to riches story. This guy can leave his farm and go get a job over here, and you know now he makes all this money. I can take care of a family of 5. Screw you, father-in-law, and we can do whatever the hell we want to do. That's just a very short blip in history, and you know as it goes on now, we're starting to see this situation again where houses are becoming harder to afford for the average person. Typically, both people do need to work if they're going to do this. Having a house and 2 kids and a wife is like $1 million venture at least over that period. So I just hear the Tradcon stuff, and what they will do is say men need to be protectors and providers, and they will be very hard on young men. And they'll put all this pressure on young men. They'll say men need to do better. You know, women just need to be good women, and men need to come in here and do all this stuff. But then when I look at it historically, I'm looking at all this stuff starting from, you know, the turn of the 2 millennia ago, coming all the way down. Young men have never had the kind of pressure that they're putting on them, and I would say unjustly, because what would happen is they would get married, he would have some kind of income that her family would know what his trajectory was going to be. You can say, oh, he's from this family, it looks like he's a pretty sharp young guy. We want to marry our daughter within the same class. We're going to give her this dowry for her wedding. When they get married, they now have what's called a conjugal fund, and this helps set up the new household. It helps set up the trade shop or whatever for whatever this guy's going to be doing, and then they would go in that way. Nowadays, what we have is this really bad deal for monogamy. You know, so you'll have these Tradcons that'll say, you need to be monogamous, you need to do that. The groom needs to make this much money, and she should never have to think about it. They never mention anything about her family contributing at all, and it's just impossible to do. And you know, when you look traditionally, the way a family attracted a high-status groom or a groom of equal class was they typically endowed their daughters with the dowry. So if you're a groom and you're looking at your options on the table, you're going to be okay with taking a monogamous match and focusing your time and efforts here because she's coming with something that's helped setting up a strong household. You know, could you imagine if I have a friend, he's an electrical engineer, okay? He's got a master's degree. And, you know, and I only imagine like, okay, if he would have, let's say he started his first job and he's making $100K a year, 90 to 100, and his trajectory is to make a lot more, whatever it is. And then there's some other family in the community. Maybe they know each other. Maybe they like each other. Maybe they don't even know each other that well. But if her family was like, you know, okay, she's 19, 20, whatever. You can go to college. We can spend this money on your college tuition or you want, or we can save this for your marriage. We have $200,000 set aside for you. She coming with $200,000 might be a good match for my buddy here because, okay, let's put this into the down payment of the house.
Right.
Let's put both of our names on it. You're going to stay at home and have the kids until they're old enough, and then if you want to get a job, do that. I'm going to be working. If this goes bust, we split the house down the middle. She has incentive to at least stay for some time. It might still suck a little bit down the line with all this custody stuff, but it would actually be a match that made sense.
She's got skin in the game.
She's got skin in the game, right. Exactly. Right now, they really don't have skin in the game. It's just, oh, well, I'm a submissive wife, and I just want to stay home and do this.
Now. You got to add in right now.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Right now. Yeah. And then 8 years goes by, and then he's sitting across the table from me, and he's just like, I don't understand.
But she said she would, you know.
Yeah, she said I do, and all that stuff, and you know, it's funny because with women like that, I feel like they're kind of more incentivized to make it seem like the guy was abusive because they have to keep this. I mean, you saw this with the Crowder situation. Right. Apparently, the footage was edited. That's what I've seen.
And like, what did he do? He yelled?
Yeah, he was in the back smoking a cigar so he wouldn't be smoking around his pregnant wife. And she came out there barefoot. She chose not to put shoes on. What? But anyways, I don't know. So then it's just like, okay, he's a bad guy. They get divorced. Now it's alimony. Now it's child support time. And it's just a stupid way of doing things, So I find it necessary to resurrect this. I'm not so crazy to say, we're going to bring back dowries, but what I'm tired of is them saying if a man tries to negotiate for himself when it comes to especially a monogamous marriage, that you're not masculine or something stupid like that. You're not being a man.
That was the other thing. Like, I kept hearing from Tradcons that women shouldn't work, right? But I kept thinking, well, maybe if you have, like, my grandma had 13 children. Mm-hmm. So that's a pretty strong case for not work. That's a lot of, but I'm like, we're having 1.5 in public school. What are you doing with your time? Yeah,
you're not even matching that.
I understand maybe like the first couple of years, but once the kid's in school, you could be a teacher and have the same schedule as the child.
Yeah, I think
3 months off in the summer, it's a decent salary.
I think a lot of that also doesn't exactly match with history. So remember earlier I told you about how before the dowry, what you had was bride wealth, formerly called bride price. Okay. Most people know it as bride price. This is where the man pays the woman's family something, not to her family. Then as scholars studied it more, they changed the name from bride price to bride wealth because bride wealth describes it better. But back then, the reason that the man paid the bride wealth was because the woman worked. We're not just talking about kids. She was actually out there on the field. So back then, agriculture was less sophisticated. And that's why you see polygyny and bride wealth in places like sub-Saharan Africa. You saw that with ancient Israelites, even Old Testament and stuff like that. And you saw this in a lot of different civilizations. And then what they noticed is that as they changed from tools women can actually handle, like the digging stick or the hoe, and they moved to the plow. The plow is this heavy instrument that takes a lot of strength, and you got to have these cattle in the front pulling it, and you're trying to keep it in a straight line. So men ended up doing this. But back then, when women were using these other tools, they would be out on the fields working all day, and when you married her family lost that labor value. So you paid them a set price, and then they used that money to marry maybe another son in their family, and then it became a circulating fund. Mm-hmm. So bride wealths are all uniform prices. It's not like this highest bidder thing. It actually is a set price.